I always thought boxers would be more comfortable.
Boxer briefs are not, because they're tighter and they bunch up around my legs.
Oh, yeah.
Part of this, I believe, is because I have a small waist but tree trunk legs.
You don't have tree trunk legs, I guess.
They're thicker than a person with my size waist would typically have.
Gotcha.
So there's these things and they just ride up constantly, and I'm always trying to like pull them back down.
That would drive me crazy.
Right. Which where boxers are, mine at least, are pretty loose.
Yeah.
So they stay. Welcome once again to Noah's Snark, where two former religious types and current snarks take a look at religious media on its own terms.
I'm Hillary.
And I am Josh, aka Josh the Least.
I know what you're referencing.
So Hillary, let's talk about what we are doing today.
Today we are doing would you call it a graphic novel or a comic?
Comic books and graphic novels are the same thing.
That's what I thought. We've had this discussion before, but I didn't want to get my head bitten off by
there are going to be people who dispute it either way.
Right.
I am a very firm believer, at least, that 95% of graphic novels are just comic books.
Okay.
The only exception I will make is if it was published as a complete work from the beginning and not released. Yes, and not released monthly, like the majority of so-called graphic novels.
Right. Was this one released?
I am not
regularly?
Absolutely certain, but I believe it was released piecemeal and then collected as we have here.
Gotcha. Well, then we're going to call it a comic book. And the comic book is called Judas, The Last Days. That's it.
It's published by IDW, written by W. Maxwell Prince, with art by John Amore.
Cool.
It is... Let's give a quick breakdown of it real quick.
Okay.
It is... The back of the book says, 2,000 years after he betrayed Messiah, Judas Iscariot is still alive, wandering a world he doesn't recognize. It's a world of the strangest of fictions have come true. Monsters, immortals, gnome librarians who monitor human history. They're all real. And all Judas wants to do is kill himself, so why can't he?
Yeah.
And that's the hook for the book. So, before we get any further, let's go ahead and describe this in one sentence. What would you say?
In one sentence, I'd say this book asks the question, what if Judas was suicidal and the other apostles and he were all immortal, but also pedophiles, transvestites, and drug addicts?
My one sentence is, don't cut yourself on all that edge.
Right.
That's the best I could think of to say it.
Right.
We could talk about it as a complete work, but I think the easiest way to really understand it is to just go through it as we do everything else.
Yeah, that sounds fine by me. Plot-wise, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we're going to come across all that stuff.
This thing could be also arguably considered a illustrated version of a word-a-day calendar, because his $10 word use is nutso.
That's funny.
And irritating.
I will say one thing before we begin. I have described this to Savannah, who was in our Holy Lands episode, and is the closest thing to religious that we've had on the show, at least, I think.
Right, yeah.
And she was, and I think somewhat reasonably, just floored by how openly offensive it is.
It's openly offensive. It is a problem.
Even I have several issues with it.
Me too.
Yeah, and not on the religious levels, because I don't care about, James or John or whoever being a figure who we care about.
Right.
But just like a lot of this is in
straight up hateful.
So it's really hard to talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, but let's just start. Our first chapter, there are only 6, is titled A Prison of Human Shape, and we are introduced to our main and titular character, Judas. He reminisces on his exceptionally long life and how he screws things up while entering a vast underground library called the Registry. Apparently here they chronicle everything that has ever happened, and once he's arrived, he interrogates a gnome librarian and is told that his fate is sealed.
You want to read the opening line?
The very first line. If you hear me flipping through the book, it's because I literally am.
Not this one. Just this page.
Yeah. If you hear me flipping, it's because we're looking at it as we go to make sure we don't miss anything.
Yeah, and we want you to feel like a part of this.
The first lines are, things never change. Ever. And the more they don't change, the more I stay the same.
Dumbest opening ever.
And we were watching him go through, like, old biblical times, it looks like.
Right.
The Victorian era, modern day.
This lets you know how deep the author thinks that he is. But how far from, actually.
Yeah, I can't claim to be a fan of this, to be fair.
I hate it.
Despite Judas's apology and his desire to change things, the gnome that he's talking to tells him that he won't tell him how he can die. And so, Judas heads off from the registry to go off in search of Matthew, who may or may not also be known as Madeline. And this is where we first get the first sign that this is just a book who's intended, I think, to offend everybody.
Yeah.
Because he goes to a demon brothel, where he is first stopped by some combination of a trans woman, a demon, and a prostitute.
Yeah.
Because it is a... Let me make sure I get this right. I'm pretty sure it is a woman with a beard.
And chest hair.
But is also a demon. And, like, offers, I've never been with something like me before. And Judas beats it up.
Right.
And it's got a longer tongue than normal, which is why I think the demon part comes in. Mm-hmm. And it's just like... I'm not to say that no one is interested in a woman with a beard. But why is that going to be the first thing that you're going to show us when you're thinking of, like, demon brothel?
Right.
Like, you could go with half demon, half human hybrid, who otherwise looks...
Right. Why are you painting...
transgender
people
in this light? And this is not the first.
No.
It is the first, but it is not the last time that it will happen. In fact, Matthew...
This is problematic.
Or Madeline, or...
He calls himself a transvestite. He is a self-described transvestite.
And the book can't decide what Matthew's name is?
Right.
I'm going to call her Madeline.
Yeah.
Because it seems to be the identity. But the book isn't really clear, nor is Madeline in the book.
Right.
And it's a...
I think this is supposed to be where the humor... I think this is supposed to be considered funny. I think
you might be right. Yeah,
I think that Matthew is supposed to bring some humor to this because he's a man dressed as a woman, and that was for a long time considered a very funny thing to do, which is a problem.
And to be fair, he is the funniest character, but it's not really that funny.
No,
and it's mostly just sexual deviant humor, which isn't
right.
It's only funny a couple of times. It's like, did you ever see The Last Airbender? Not the movie, but the show?
No.
One of the characters is blind. Some of her best jokes are blind jokes. Like, at one point, she's like, it's over there! And they're like, oh god, you found it? And she's like, no.
Yeah,
no, I can't see
That's funny self-awareness.
But she's also just funny generally, and isn't always making blind jokes. Eventually, you're like, okay, we get it. You were blind. Like, you're blind. Yeah. Fine.
Yeah.
This is this.
This is written by a straight person.
I, have...
It's silly for men to be feminine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, if I call him Matthew or Madeline, that's what I'm referring to, but it's hard to tell if it's...
Just call him Matthew.
Yeah.
They don't even refer to him as Madeline, really, ever.
That's fair. That's fair. So we'll go with Matthew. It's just really hard to determine how I'm supposed to fall on this, because the book isn't sure.
No, the book is wrong. The book is stupid.
Okay. When Judas does meet up with Matthew in the demonic brothel, they talk about why Judas is interested in dying, and Judas claims that he's earned it at this point. Matthew asks him if he thinks that his work is complete, and Judas yells at him about how the Messiah is not coming back, and there's no hope left out there in the world anyway. Asked by Matthew when the last time he thought the Messiah was coming back was, Judas reflects on the time that the two of them were captured by Nazis and experimented on, which ended in a beating because apparently neither of them can bleed.
Right.
At this point, we sort of get the idea, and we're going to learn more, but the apostles, all of them, all 12 or 13, are immortal, invulnerable, can't be harmed by basically anything.
Can't be killed, can't be bloodied.
They live forever, they don't age, they can't bleed, they barely feel, I think.
Right.
Which is why a lot of them have fallen
They can be obese, so I guess you can still gain weight.
But a lot of them are having a really hard time dealing with being alive for so long with no... anything on the horizon. They don't know what's coming.
Right.
They're supposed to supposedly be waiting for Jesus, but he hasn't showed up, and they've given up on it.
Yeah.
In large part.
Right.
So that's really the hook of the story. And this memory about the Nazis, they're tied up, they're getting beat, and then some army people break in, a light shines at the door, and this was the last time Judas was like, oh, he's finally here, Jesus is back. But it's just the U.S. Army.
It's the same thing.
It's the same thing. Matthew points out that the World War II was hardly the worst genocide that they'd even witnessed, and they argue about whether to take some joy in the lives that they do have. It is apparently Judas's fault that none of them can die, and in Matthew's words, all because you needed a little extra cash.
Right.
In his own defense, Judas says that it's much more complicated than that, but Madeline points out that no matter how noble or masochistic he is now, he's still alive, and therefore cannot really repent. Further, no one, including the gnomes who control the registry, or the Pharisees themselves, can end his story except the Messiah himself. Because he's tried.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have any notes at this point?
No.
Okay. If he wants to die, Judas is going to have to find the capital T teacher. And this conversation is being eavesdropped on by one of the gnomes who is in the brothel, and he reports back to the same gnome who Judas had earlier been arguing with. This prompts that head gnome to call the president, who holds a Star of David encased in a paperweight as he's on the phone.
Do we ever find out what that's about? I just realized I forgot about that element.
Like
the
what?
Paperweight, the Star of David paperweight.
No, I think it's just supposed to give us a hint about who this person is.
Oh.
Yeah, but you get told pretty quickly, so it's not like...
I was just like, he's Jewish.
Yeah, exactly. But if you see it here, it is like an old parchment, so it's like old.
Right, right.
But even then, like, who would put a Star of David on an old parchment?
Yeah, well, I'm like, maybe, like, at first I was like, oh, maybe he was a World War II survivor, like he was a prison camp survivor.
Yeah. But we will find out who it is, of course. Right now, we're supposed to be experiencing such intrigue.
Yes.
Are you intrigued?
No.
I
hate reading comic books, Josh. I hate it.
That's fair.
I want to like it.
It's
I tried really hard, but I don't like it. And I don't really like the illustrations. I don't think they're good. Definitely not interesting. We get to experience the classic comic book trope of women's breasts not being
yeah,
even kind of realistic.
Yeah.
Just bolted on fake boobs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hate that.
That's fair. Yeah, I wouldn't say it's by any means bad, but it is not inspiring.
No, boring.
Yeah, it is pretty by-the-book comic book art. Which is...
Yeah, nothing wrong with it. I just don't like it.
Yeah, and you're right. The boobs are just...
Stupid.
Fiction boobs.
Right.
I'm not an expert I'm no expert in titties.
Nobody who's ever seen a pair in real life.
Well, comic books are often about the idealistic human form. But
of women.
Of women especially, but the men are always...
But no, in this book, there is no idealistic man. It's just, the only women that exist in this are the porn star variety.
That's fair. Well, Jesus might be the idealistic man.
No, he just looks like a hipster.
Yeah. But I mean, look at that body. Look at the muscles in his...
You can see his ribcage. That's a ribcage.
You're probably right. Okay. But do you have anything to say about Chapter 1 before we...
No.
Okay. Chapter 2 is called Now My Heart is Full. And we open with Judas and Matthew walking down the street, and Matthew's recalling a recurring dream that he has, which is going up to Jesus when he's on the cross, bleeding and dying, and Matthew licks his wounds.
Yeah.
Except this isn't a dream about helping the Messiah. It's a wet dream.
Once again, he's a transvestite, self-described, which means he's disgusting and sexually devious.
Right.
And
he's currently wearing a wig. He's dressed as a woman.
Right.
And he's telling a story about how he walks
sexually licking Jesus' blood.
Off the cross.
Right.
And it's like Hillary said, it's just supposed to be... He's a sexual deviant. Isn't that funny and hilarious?
Right.
Also, he's a transvestite.
It's one of the worst
in
things
the
you
word
can be.
they use.
Right. In the word they use.
Right.
Important.
We want to keep clarifying that
They
because
said it.
we are not saying it.
We are not saying it. Yeah.
But it's how it is described here, and it's all we get. And I don't want to assume good intent.
I don't want to assume anything. We can't.
Okay. Judas points out at this point that, of course, he's a sick, sick man. And that was one of the notes I wrote was, except he's not really a man, but I guess he is, because it's hard to tell if he's supposed to be a trans
Gender
person? Yeah, a trans woman.
Right.
Or if he's they're calling
just
him,
cross-dressing.
A transvestite, or he's just cross-dressing. It's completely impossible to tell.
Impossible to tell.
And this is part of why not only does it just throw any, like, devoutness under the table, which is fine, but it also throws entire groups of people under the table.
Right.
Which is very different.
It is. I don't know what to do about it.
Yeah. But okay. They are headed to go see James the Lesser, who is revealed to be a tremendous man with his upper arm wrapped the way... I don't know what you call it, but when you wrap your arm because you're about to do drugs.
Yeah. He has, like, the, that, like, rubber tube. He's tied off his arm.
Yeah, and he's holding a syringe when they meet him, because he's at a table. There are several people there. There's a rabbit on the table. One guy is passed out. Another guy is... There's a monkey.
Yeah.
Who's clearly on drugs.
It's all very dirty and disgusting looking, too. Everyone's drooling or...
Yeah. It's a really grimy place.
Yeah.
They've got food, booze, drugs.
Yeah. It just looks like an opium den.
It's an opium den. James the Lesser, one of the apostles, lives in a
drug den, because they do a lot of different things.
I'm not sure if we mentioned this, but the Matthew here is Matthew from the Bible. He
right.
is the Apostle Matthew.
Everyone we meet, if you're like, that's the name of an apostle, it's because it is. It's
right.
just it's an apostle. Including this fat guy.
Mm-hmm. So he's at the table, and he tells Judas and Matthew about two of them are voluntary diabetics who decided to do it for the indulgence of it all.
I don't know. I guess like the blood sugar going up and down is like a high.
They're addicted to insulin and sweets.
Right.
So they're real committed to the highs and lows. And then there's another guy who hasn't slept in 3 weeks because he's strung out on Magritte.
Yeah. In French, he says, this is not a crack pipe.
Oh.
Yeah.
I guess it's a Magritte pipe. I don't know what Magritte is. I'm not the druggy guy.
Crack.
I'm not... Okay. Oh, so why would you say it's not a crack pipe? It is then.
I don't know.
Okay. That's fine.
I don't know.
I just was like, okay, he's talking French. That's fine. So basically the premise here is that James the Lesser is a glutton of a very different variety from Matthew, who's a glutton for sex
he's lustful.
Yes, he's lustful.
This is gluttonous.
He's gluttony. He does drugs. He eats, which is why he's obese.
Right.
He's even got a magical syringe, which manages to help him get drugs into his system.
Right, because they're not supposed to be able to. The bloodstream is not accessible.
Right, because, again, they are invulnerable. They cannot be penetrated. And so a needle would not do it, except this one is magic from...
some magic scientist.
James the Lesser's dealer.
Yeah.
Dr. Runeberg.
He'll come back.
He'll come back. That's why I'm saying it.
Runeberg.
He's a purveyor and engineer of magic drug toys. But even then, it can only get so far into his veins, and all he gets is a little bullshit buzz. But he's trying. James and Judas fight a little bit. Not physically, but verbally. And James asks if Judas is mean to him because of the misunderstanding they had in the Bible Belt. And we get another flashback about what happened back then.
Yep.
Do you want to tell us about it?
I didn't really make it... When it comes to my memory, the only thing I remember is being perplexed as to what part of the South smells like sage all the time. I've lived here my whole life. Like, he describes it, he's like, I love the South, it all smells like sage. I'm like, what the fuck, are you on a sage farm? Because I don't know what that means.
It looks like they're in the bayou.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, it says Knoxville, Tennessee. Yeah,
they're in Tennessee. I've been in Nashville, Tennessee. It does not smell like sage, ever.
Well, that was the 50s. Maybe it smelled different back then.
I don't know.
But basically what happened in the Bible Belt was in the 50s, Judas is hanging out in the South because he likes it because it smells like sage.
He found a nice, simple life like he's always wanted.
Right. Judas is working as a fisherman, and on one of his trips into the city to sell his fish, he's told that a friend came looking for him. The excessively, and still at that time, obese James is visiting him, and initially pointing out that he has no friends. Once this person describes that he had a huge appetite, Judas freaks out and starts running back home. And when he arrives, he finds James, the apostle, in the process of attempting to rape 2 little girls.
Yep.
So Judas jumps on him, and he beats him for both being a disgusting person and for ruining the little bit of peace that he had managed.
Yeah, so they're just throwing in both rape and pedophilia.
Yeah.
Just throw it in there.
Oh, I do drugs, I eat a lot, I also rape little girls.
I love raping tiny girls. Yeah,
And Judas is, of course, upset. He stops him and he calls him a sick fucking bastard.
Yeah, fun. Pedophilia.
And James is completely unharmed. He's laughing as he gets his ass kicked. He's just like, hey. And Judas is still like, what an asshole. And Matthew, for his part, says, Jimmy, you bad boy. If I'd known you had a taste for unripe fruit, I would have gladly introduced you to a two-headed nubile.
Yeah.
2 heads, but 1 giant tongue.
Yeah, and that's about where I start dry heaving into my pillow. Ugh. Ugh.
Back in the real world, Judas asks James if he knows anything useful about how an immortal can die. James does not, but he also asks Judas if he truly believes he even deserves to die, and if a certain someone may not take kindly to his attempts. In James's words, he's killed the Word, capital W.
Yeah.
He snuffed out the light, capital L.
Yep.
And there's no stone, and that's no stone lightly thrown. While Judas defends himself by saying he's not so bad, and it's been 2,000 years anyway, and no one should care if he wants to kill himself, we see another agent of the president report on the 3 apostles, and he is told to send in the golems. So stony creatures burst into the room, and they capture the apostles, placing burlap sacks on their heads and leaving them in a room together, as Matthew complains about the passé situation. Because again, he's funny, and he's not really worried about dying because they can't.
Right.
So it's just like, how passé. And the very last line of this chapter is, there's no peace for any of us. That much I can assure you.
Cool. Boring. I don't care if they live or die.
Yeah. Anything to say about chapter 2 in particular?
I guess not. I thought I wrote a bunch of...
child rapist.
James is a child. Yeah, he's a pedophile and drug addict, and none of that is treated like a real bad thing.
They just literally pass over all this stuff.
And they joke about it.
Yeah.
Matthew's
like, if only I knew you liked little girls, I would have...
And then he used the word nubile, which made me so uncomfortable and unhappy.
This is why I described it. Don't cut yourself on all this edge. Because we are 2 chapters in out of 6.
Yeah.
And I'm just already overwhelmed with, you're not as cool as you think you are.
It's not cool.
So we're moving on to chapter 3. This is called Necessary Monsters. And we find Judas between the Black and Caspian Seas long ago. And he's riding with 2 other men toward a destroyed city. Once there, one of his companions mentions that this is clearly the work of a demon, a monster, as no man could do such a thing. Judas has a simple, single response. Men are monsters.
Can't disagree with that.
Yeah, it's not untrue. Back in the present day, Matthew sings a song. Now little Matthew was always strange, wearing women's underthings.
I hate it.
It's like, we get it.
He
wears women's clothes.
Like lady clothes. That's fine. Men look great in ladies' clothes. Better than women sometimes.
Right. It's such a one-note character.
Yeah.
And all of them are.
Yeah, no, it's true.
It's particularly annoying because it's...
I do not like or relate to any single character in this entire thing, which is probably why I hated it so much. Aside from the one-notedness, they were also basically just terrible people in different ways.
Judas is the closest to a redeemable person in this.
Yeah, and he's boring.
You got no personality.
No personality.
I want to die. Okay, fine.
So, die, man. I don't know. I don't care. Why am I on this journey with you?
But he sings that little song, and James implores him to shut up because his head hurts so much and he needs his drugs and his magic needle, and it's just the 2 of them there because Judas is being interrogated by one of the gnomes. He's asked if he is indeed one of the 12 disciples, and if they all are in fact still alive. But he's indignant about answering because the gnomes know the answers anyway.
Right.
And they go through a list of nicknames for Jesus. The Word, the Advocate, the Alpha, the Omega, the Teacher, the Beloved Son, the Cornerstone, King of Jews, Messiah, Lamb of God, the Proto-Hippie, and Fisher of Man.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, the gnome's asking Judas questions, but up until this point, the only thing we know about the gnomes is that they know everything. Mm-hmm. So what the fuck is happening?
It's literally never understood why he's doing this. But after going through this, and Judas is like, what is happening? Is that a polygraph proto-hippie? What are you doing?
And he's like, we'll take that as a yes.
Right. We're going back to the flashback of the ruined, destroyed city. And Judas meets a beautiful woman there who calls herself the Daughter of Nothing, a mystic, an oracle, and a fabled lover.
And a fake boob advocate.
Yes. Except this is before fake boobs, so she's just got real nice titties.
Nope. Those aren't any kind
That's
of
not
mail.
how boobs
That is
work.
not how boobs or gravity work.
But she's destroying some book of scripture in a test of the forces of nature, wondering what teachings will survive and what a blind man was doing with a book of scripture. This is literally what we get.
Yeah.
I'm just paraphrasing, keeping it simpler.
Yeah, that sounded about like what I remember,
Mhm.
which is I don't know what's happening, and I
No idea.
still don't care.
Yeah, it's hard to care, but it's also like, what?
What? She's reading a book upside down and letting the pages fall out naturally, and like, I guess which pages fall is supposed to be.
I actually wrote down in my
meaningful?
notes.
Yeah.
I wrote down on my notes. If that doesn't make sense to you, just know it's a paraphrase designed to make her riddle speak more understandable.
Right.
But she moves on immediately to asking Judas if he's going to make love to her, or if she has to drug him for it.
That's why she exists.
So we're back to the gnome interrogating Judas in the real world, in the current world, and he asks Judas if he knows the purpose of the gnomes, if he believes in free will, and if he knows who Dr. Runeberg is. If the name's familiar, it's because we said keep it in mind, because that is the man who invented James's magic needle, and also apparently wrote a book which postulates that Judas is a divine creature in his own right. So after Judas receives this book, he gets a copy of it from the gnome. We see shadowy figures watching from the outside of the interrogation room. And they're commenting on how intoxicating it is to be so near to Judas, and that he's, quote, contextually charging, end quote,
Yeah.
the air in the room.
Yeah. Again, I think he's trying to sound smart. He's trying so hard to sound so smart and so deep.
I don't know what contextually charging is.
I don't know. And we never find out. We don't know what that means or what he does to these people, really, do we? Do we ever find out?
I don't think so.
Ugh.
Well, there might be some explanation, but it's never really that clear. But we'll get there
Okay.
in, like, chapter 5.
Maybe you can explain it.
Maybe. So we do another flashback now, and Judas is in bed with the daughter of nothing, and she knows who he is, and she can feel the spear in his back that killed his friend. She asks if Judas seeks forgiveness, and he tells her that she misunderstands. Jesus had forgiven him even before the first lie spilled from Judas's lips, and that's what makes it worse. He made it so simple, and he carried the load for everyone, and talking to Jesus was like talking to the deepest, truest part of yourself. And even when you exposed some flawed part of yourself, he just stretched his tolerance and forgiveness even further to cover that part of you up too.
Cool. Sounds like a small guy.
Right. But Judas got confused, and he thought that he needed to die in order to become something more beautiful, but he was wrong too. And now he knows that
Except he wasn't.
Right. As we've
talked about on this
many
show.
times.
Yeah.
It's actually 100%.
He did have to kill Jesus. It was part of the prophecy, and it was the only reason why Jesus is immortalized.
Now, this book doesn't appear to be taking the Bible as necessarily prophecy or necessarily true.
Right.
So in the world of this book, maybe it wasn't true.
Gotcha. And he just
But
murdered
in
his
our
friend.
world, right. But in our world, where we know that the Bible supposedly says this had to happen,
Right.
it was 100% necessary.
Right.
So he would be the hero, as we've discussed.
Yes.
But it's hard to tell if the premise of this is that the Bible is true.
I can't. I have no idea what the point of view is in this book. He
Right.
doesn't have a point of view, or at least not a clearly defined one.
Right. But Judas understands that because he was wrong about Jesus needing to die, that his curse is to live forever with that mistake. And while he's leaving the daughter of nothing, he comes across a photo or a drawing of this place's former Kagan, which is supposed to be a word for a king or an emperor, the ruler of this old city.
Okay, I did not know that.
I had to look it up. It's like an old, like, Uyghur word or something.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it means ruler.
Okay.
The daughter of nothing points out that this is the tyrant who abandoned his people, and Judas recognizes this person as Paul, also the apostle. On the next page, Paul is also revealed to be one of the shadowy figures who is watching the interrogation, and he is also revealed to be the current president of the United States, the person that the gnome was making the phone calls to.
And he apparently also gets contextually charged by Judas, which I guess is sexual. I don't know.
In his own words, Paul loves being at a pulpit and spreading the word, which, to be clear, is Paul's and not Jesus's. And it's a lot easier from a seat of power.
Yeah.
So he often is a ruler or a senator or a
Throughout
president.
history, he's been a lot of major rulers.
He tells Judas that Judas is special, And we're back in the flashback, and we see a giant, horrendous demon monster attack Judas, just as Matthew in the current world makes a prison break. He has guns now, and once again we have to make another dumb joke because James is utterly horrified about where he was keeping them.
Yep. Up his, It's so stupid. Also, I'm pretty sure doesn't Matthew make a Tu Wong Fu joke here, which I think is unfair to a really great movie.
He does make a Tu Wong Fu.
Yeah.
He says, "Oh, James, don't be so provincial. You act like you've never seen an immortal transvestite take down a horde of underlings before." And then a panel or two later, he says, as he's flying through the air, shooting guys in the head,
yeah.
Tu Wong Fu.
Yeah. Great movie. Hey, watch that, not this.
There we go.
Wait, is this the monster that has the Halloween faces? Because I actually kind of liked Halloween face monster.
This guy?
Nope, it's
okay.
later.
Matthew's currently killing just regular schmucks.
Yeah, just little demons.
All the monsters and stuff will come in later. But Matthew kills everyone, and he aims to track Judas down, who is talking to Paul about his pending suicide. Paul points out that in the beginning he was trying to shut down his entire little experiment, but eventually Jesus made his way into his head, and he was infected with immortality as well. Paul, in the old times, was trying to shut down the whole Christian cult.
Right.
But he was also infected with immortality.
He was converted.
Mm-hmm. Now he knows that every story has its players, and it doesn't work if every cog isn't turning as it should. So we're back in the flashback again. Judas attacks the monster. As in the present day, Paul begins to freak out, like his eyes multiply and he starts to shake or something.
It looks like it's like if you it's like trails, like if you're on mushrooms or something, and you move your hand and everything just it's like your hand following your hand. That's what his head is doing, and I can't tell if it's like his head's actually doing something, or if it's from Judas's point of view, he's all wonky.
I thought it was Judas's point of view.
Okay.
But it was not entirely
not clear.
certain.
Okay.
His teeth separate, his face gets all weird. He says this exact quote: "The concrete and the rainbow, they're the same. A single bird that is somehow all birds."
Yeah, this guy does drugs. I'm saying the author of this fucking thing is on drugs.
"Each thing is infinite, impossible. The golems and the horrors. My God, it's you, Judas. It's magic? No. Science? No. Neither."
Cool.
Just audible hieroglyphs. Just the way things always seem so strange. This is literal dialogue.
No,
I've read it all.
I know. It's stupid.
An explosion rocks the room as Judas is taking all of this in, and Matthew and James break in. They rescue Judas, who is hung up on what Paul said about something being wrong with him. And at this point, everybody in this goddamn book is talking in riddles.
Yes.
But Judas knows where he has to go. End of part 3. We're in chapter 4 now. It's called Runeberg's Good News. We open with narration from Niles Runeberg. This is the doctor in question.
Yes.
He intends to disclose profane and sacred truths in this, his final work. And we see some of his experiments. Drug-fueled rats who have begun to replicate Moses with the 10 Commandments.
The number one best thing about this entire comic.
It's true. We see
Mouse Moses is the cutest damn thing.
It's literally labeled Moses Mouse.
Yeah.
His whiskered supplicants.
Oh my god. Just the idea of rodent prophets makes me so happy.
He's got 2 little stone tablets.
Yeah.
And he's showing them what's going on.
Not gonna lie, I'm probably going to get somebody on Etsy to make me a...
little terrarium.
No, I want a taxidermied mouse holding the 10 Commandments. That's what funny. I want. I want it so bad.
That's funny. Along the Moses mice, he has made a heroin substitute and little capsules that are filled with scripture.
Yeah, literally. It's just like little pieces of paper in a capsule, because that's how medicine works.
Oh, well, it says here, the word, when it was made flesh, was also made into a drug. And so he's created an ingestible variety of it. You can swallow the gospel if it pleases you.
Yeah.
And apparently that'll make you
turn into a mouse.
Feel something.
Prophet.
Who knows? His latest publication, though not the one that he is currently working on, posits something similar to what I have been saying for years. This is me, Josh, having said it. Judas was forced, perhaps unknowingly, to fulfill a task by divine order, and thus made the impossible possible through the betrayal of Jesus. This is Runeberg's point. It's also my point.
Yes, we have talked about it here, and yeah.
So in turn...
Glad that point of view is being
Right,
brought up.
so finally, maybe we get a point of view.
Right.
And one that I could kind of side with.
Yeah.
Because I have obviously sided with it. In turn, Runeberg says that he and the other apostles were made immortal, and we then catch up with all the others and what they are doing. Peter is holding up a kill of some sort. He looks like an old British hunting man.
Yes.
James we've caught up with. Bartholomew seems to be a holy man, but looks like he's in India, because you can see like the Taj Mahal type building in the back.
Yeah, you're right.
And he's got the thing on his head.
Right.
So he looks like he's a holy man, but in a different religion. John is a clown, sitting in the rain.
Yeah, that's
Sad.
upsetting.
He's a sad clown with rain on him. We've caught up with Matthew, of course. James the Greater is a thin and possibly starving, maybe holy man. He's got pages here, but he's just sitting in a dark room, and he's really, really thin. Simon is a punk rocker, complete with mohawk. Thomas is relaxing in a tropical paradise while wearing a trucker hat and drinking out of a coconut. Philip is a fancy-looking either businessman or other guy peering into a nighttime cityscape.
Right. I guess he's like a CEO type.
Mm-hmm. Andrew looks like a high-tech thief complete with ninja stars. And Thaddeus appears to just be a farmer.
Thaddeus has his little Star of David, too.
Yeah. Is that how they know each other?
I don't know. He's the only one in these pictures that has one.
Yeah. So, that's a thing.
Whatever.
Niles Runeberg's work is interrupted by a neighbor who clearly has a crush on him and offers him brownies, but he rejects them. In his internal monologue, he knows that she's cute and he's fucked it up, but he's busy working. Okay.
Yeah.
Just
all right.
Let him work. But she is real cute. Look at her.
Yeah.
So cute. We now find out why Judas is so somber these days. His narration tells us that everything he touches turns to shit. He's been alive 2,000 years looking for the same man. But at this point, he doesn't know if he's ever coming back. And while reading his Bible, he meets Susanna. They bond over drinks and his weird name, and they end up getting together.
Mm-hmm.
Sometime later, he meets her literally crazy uncle in the hospital. He claims to feel the pain of other people, the uncle does, and even mentions seeing the gnomes at one point, writing down his story.
Right.
Having met him a whole 4 minutes ago, he asks Judas if he will take the tubes out of him and let him die.
Judas is like, cool. I got you, bro.
The uncle takes it to be a mercy, and apparently Judas does go for it because we now cut to the funeral.
Right.
Judas tries to reassure his girlfriend that maybe her uncle is in a better place, and she gets pissed off because it's annoying.
Yeah.
And it's a platitude.
Yes.
And she's irritated, and she leaves Judas
She's
at
in
the
mourning.
funeral.
Don't throw that shit.
Maybe he's in a better place. And even though he knows that she doesn't believe this stuff.
Do more than you can handle.
Right.
Yeah.
And he knows that she doesn't believe this. Part of their bond was like, oh, your name is Judas. That's weird.
Yeah.
It's like, that's a bunch of weird, crazy bullshit.
Yeah.
But he's like, nah, he's in a better place. She's like, man, fuck you.
Yeah. Deservedly so.
But she leaves, and when he eventually makes it back home, he finds that she has killed herself. So this is when he's decided that he's done living now, and he just really needs to figure out how to kill himself, because that's all he wants now. The last page of this chapter is James and Matthew and Judas knocking on Runeberg's door, saying that they need his help. This was, your background chapter to figure out why Judas is so sad.
Right.
Chapter 5. It's called On the Road. We open with a massive explosion emanating from Earth. Something hits the Earth and it blows up. A huge battle of monsters is destroying a city. Just for a few examples. A giant naked angel creature tying off. Some horse-headed humans. An astronaut in a top hat.
Yeah.
A massive...
I remember that astronaut, hon.
I'm showing it to Hillary so she can recall.
There he is.
Yeah, the astronaut in the top hat.
Yeah.
There's a giant tentacle here. And there's a giant man holding up a car. Several of them, but this is one holding up a car.
Yeah.
There's another.
There's a naked man peeing.
Yeah, peeing on a car, I guess. People are fleeing the scene, obviously, and a family is eventually trapped as the father calls out to Jesus to save them. Just as he does, a sword pierces through one of the horse-headed people that were chasing them, and Judas is revealed to be the hero in question.
Yeah,
carrying a katana,
that horse.
And involved in this for reasons that are as yet unknown. No one knows what happened.
Where did he get a katana?
Yeah. He checks in with Matthew, who's riding a giant slithering worm creature, and comments that nothing arouses him more than a dose of gratuitous violence.
Hey, this picture kind of reminds me of the first Avengers.
It's not
like those
dissimilar.
alien things, just like that, can just like float.
Yeah.
Just, like, float through the air and among the buildings.
Matthew also points out that he is hard as a rock right now.
Ugh.
James also wanders about amongst giant bug monsters, still ranting uncontrollably because he's not high, I guess. And now we finally cut to a few hours ago and understand what's supposed to have happened. Judas and Runeberg are talking about the plot. Judas asks if Runeberg knows something he does not about himself, and asks if he's responsible for the monsters and the world being all fucked up. Runeberg tells him, one man isn't responsible for the shape of things, but their conversation is interrupted by Paul, who thanks Runeberg for helping him understand why his dear friend Judas means to the world, and shows his appreciation by blasting Runeberg with what appears to be fire. Explosion. He's knocked out. And Judas is shot, and he's like, what's happening? Matthew calls him a prick. Why are you being a prick? And Paul says, why? Because I'm Paul of Tarsus. And so we now cut even further back to the road to Damascus, and we catch up with Saul, which, if you're not familiar with your Bible, was Paul's name before he had his Damascus Road experience and converted to Christianity.
Right.
He's hunting for the apostles with his friend Barnabas. And this is when he gets his Damascus Road experience. He sees a vision of Jesus, which is in fact the real Jesus, and he immediately falls for him. And that does sound a little sexual, but we'll get there.
Yeah.
I say it on purpose. Back in the village, Jesus explains that there's no such thing as a truth, but that any idea can be turned into something better. All men can even live forever if they know how to change the story. And he puts his hand on Paul's knee as he's explaining this. And he points out that even though Paul saw them as enemies before, now there's something better. And we get a montage of them creating things and partying and sexing all the time.
Yeah.
Jesus can literally create things like universes and creatures.
Right.
And him and Paul are in a relationship.
Getting drunk and banging
it out. Paul spends most of his time preaching now. And he comes home to find Jesus has found the gnome that Paul created. Because using what Jesus had taught him, Paul created the very first of the little gnomes who have been in the story as the scribes, keeping track of everything. And he intended the gnome to write down their story, Paul and Jesus. Jesus seems totally off-put by it. He begins to grow distant from Paul, and a few days later, Paul and his friend Barnabas are attacked by an angry crowd due to Paul's preaching. Barnabas is stabbed, and Paul rushes him to Jesus where they live so that Jesus will heal Barnabas. But Jesus is packed up, and he's ready to leave Paul. He doesn't heal Barnabas, and the magic of his presence begins to fade from Paul as he leaves. But Paul is upset. And he's
dick.
Yeah. This leaves Paul upset and angry, and he uses the last vestiges of the power that he has to think things into existence. Gnomes, golems, monsters, nightmares. And Barnabas decomposes into a skeleton, and the final page of this chapter is Paul holding up the skeleton as he proclaims that we'll make them all sorry. So essentially all the monsters...
just a burned lover. A scorned lover.
Yeah. All the monsters that exist, including the angel that's tying off, as we can see in this panel here, were created by Paul using the very last of his Jesus powers to make things exist. And he's just doing it because his friend, Barnabas, was not healed by Jesus. Although why he wasn't healed is a question.
You know, it's Jesus being a dick.
He's just being a dick.
He got stabbed because he was supporting you.
Yeah.
And you have the power to heal him, and you peace out.
He's like, what about us? You can't just go. Our story. I made him to take down our stories end. Our new ones begin. Grace is constant. Or grace is constant change. I'm only now beginning to see. And then he just leaves, and Barnabas dies.
Yeah.
And Paul's like, what the fuck?
Asshole.
Okay. But that's the end of chapter 5. We're now in chapter 6, which is the last one.
Yay!
It's the longest one, at least as far as pure exposition goes.
Okay.
When you got here, were you finally like, finally, something?
Yes. I actually do recall feeling that way.
Chapter 6 was...
Also, just like, I kept checking to see how many more pages I had left, and at this point I was like, oh, this is doable.
This is doable, I can do this.
Right.
Okay, so we're at chapter 6. It is called Everlasting Life. As the apocalypse began, Judas, Matthew, and James were joined by Runeberg's neighbor, who was mostly concerned about what happened to him, because she heard the explosion. Mm-hmm. The woman who had a crush on him, who was real cute.
Right.
She comes by and she's wondering what's happening. Judas tells the others that whatever is happening through him, so he's going to have to try to stop it. Matthew thinks that they should just ride the end of the world out. We cut back to the Last Supper, where we see Judas with his bag of silver that he got for betraying Jesus. He claims it felt like someone took control of him, but it is done now. And when Jesus enters the room, he's understanding of what Judas has done. He's aware of it already, and he's fine with it. Back in the present, Judas has an idea, and he enlists all of his friends to help him. He goes to confront Paul, while Matthew and James are going to wait for the big moment. In the meantime, they fight some fire breathers, a giant anthropod, a collection of fiendish-looking Girl Scouts who are possibly zombies, a Buddhist bodhisattva come to life.
Is that the deer?
Yes.
I like the deer.
Oh, no, sorry. That is different. The warrior deer geisha is in a kimono. That is a different creature. The bodhisattva is this guy, breathing fire.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, anthropod,
warrior deer
and a
geisha,
bodhisattva, creepy Girl Scouts. Or just girls, I guess.
Girl zombies.
Girl zombies. Oh, here we go. I got all that from the caption here.
Gotcha.
Fire breathers, giant anthropod.
Ghoul Scouts. Really? Ghoul Scouts
Ghoul
of
Scouts.
America.
I forgot about that. Okay, but they're fighting all these things. Paul declares that he has the absolute right to rewrite the world in his own horrible vision, and explains to Judas that they are the Word. Back in 122 AD, Paul has begun a congregation for his fellow immortals, and he tells a few judicious lies about how Jesus created the first gnome scribe and healed Barnabas before telling him to spread the word. This is where he first began to take power, except in this case it was just over the apostles.
I'm so bored. I'm just as bored as when I was reading it.
Mm-hmm. But back in the present, he explains how he's always stayed in a position of power for the last 2,000 years, before he finally realized that he can just set the world ablaze. Now, Judas and Paul fight pointlessly, because they are both invulnerable, and Paul points out that when they are near each other, impossible things become possible.
Oh, this is like the fight between Neo and...
A little bit.
Yeah, what's his face? In
Smith.
What is it, the second... Smith. Was it the second one? Where
Or
they
the
had
third.
that, like, waste of time fight? Or, like, neither of you were going to die, so we're just going to watch you
I think that's the
fight
second one.
to no conclusion for a very long time.
Yeah, and Smith has all the copies. And
Yeah. Oh, I hated that.
But Paul's head is consistently turning into weird stuff this whole time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's got... I don't know, he turns into like a tentacle, or part of it just is missing. He has like green lasers coming out of his face. He's a ball of lights here.
Yeah.
So things are just constantly happening. Paul describes some of the terrible things that are happening just because James, Judas, and Paul are so close together. In Ohio, a young girl's imaginary friend just came to life and slit her creator's throat. In Manila, electrical wires have gained personalities and begun chasing townspeople. Just across the street, a 12-headed wolf is chewing on the bones of the dozen babies he just devoured. Every impossible thing, all true at once. So, from what I'm supposed to understand, I think, Judas and Paul and all the apostles, but particularly Judas, were left with vestiges of Jesus' creation power. So when Paul and Judas get back together, it's possible it's just the two of them because they were the closest to Jesus, maybe?
Yeah.
They are able to change the rules of reality. Because Judas was the one who betrayed Jesus and was close to him in that way, and because he was the one who was supposed to fulfill the impossible by doing something terrible.
Right.
And Paul got it from apparently being Jesus' lover. And being taught it by Jesus, to be fair.
Right.
And because Paul is a scorned lover, he decided to destroy the entire world, but he needed Judas's power to do it. Because if they're together, Paul can set the world ablaze. Otherwise...
That's the contextual... What did he say?
Contextually charging things.
Right, okay.
When the two of them are together, they can contextually charge everything and change the word, which is the fabric of reality.
Gotcha.
And
I thought Jesus was the word.
Jesus is the word, but the two of them together are able to supplant it.
I thought bird was the word.
The bird is the real word. Okay. Paul intends to destroy the world using the very worst ideas that have ever existed. Because everything Jesus did, including loving him, was meaningless, and he just wants to watch the whole world burn. He straps Judas to a cross, and he props him up on this plateau that they're on before James sneaks up on him, at Judas's cue, and injects him with the super heroin that Niles Runeberg had created, which is apparently strong enough to get a family of dragons high.
Cool.
This causes Paul to explode.
A lot of heroin.
That is a lot of super heroin. Getting injected with this causes Paul to explode, and James dies with him as he chases his high. He just really wanted to be high. Runeberg appears again and is revealed to be Jesus, using the very clever disguise of a pair of glasses.
Yep, very Clark Kent. There that shaggy-haired proto-hippie is.
We are also supposed to feel slightly bad for James as he dies, because Matthew comforts him as he goes. And
I don't care if that pedophile dies.
yeah, exactly. Why would we possibly care about this? But in some of his last words, Matthew says to him, "Oh, James, you were the best of us."
What?
And James says, "Do you mean it?" And he goes, "No, sweetie. You were repulsive to the very end."
That's a good line.
Which is, to be fair, how he should go out, because he was repulsive.
He was the worst of them, for sure,
That
we saw.
But, technically, I guess there's a moment for... I guess it wasn't sympathy, it was more just like, here's one more...
I don't know.
But
now Jesus is leading Judas into... this is like the Harry Potter train station sequence.
right.
When Harry's like in between being dead and alive, and they're just sitting in that big white space.
Yeah, he's in a white room. There's a periodic table with a tea set sitting
A literal periodic table?
Mm-hmm.
It's a periodic table. And I hate it.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
That's funny. It's stupid.
It's stupid.
Jesus and Judas talk about some things, and how nothing makes any sense and how the world is bullshit, and Jesus finally reveals the big project that he's been working on for 2,000 years. Grace. The word grace. Mm-hmm. Capital G, grace. Every day, people make sacrifices or intervene on behalf of others, and they're choosing light and love over darkness. With grace, they could change the entire world and erase the line between what is and isn't. So he shows Judas the possibilities of the flesh-made word, and they return to the real world. Jesus leaves him, Judas, after asking him what he's going to do next, but he doesn't actually wait for the answer.
Did they already talk about the suicides? This whole thing?
This?
Yeah, and they talk about like all the artists and everybody who committed suicide, like Kurt Cobain and...
Oh, do they?
Yeah, and then they're in this room with all the pictures of like Van Gogh, Hemingway. Oh no, that's Hemingway.
Let's find out.
Okay, It's in the next part.
It's in this part?
Yeah.
Oh.
I don't know. This is the Hall of Suicide, Messiah proclaims.
Ah.
And
yes, so what Hiller's referring to...
E. Hemingway, D.F. Wallace, K. Cobain. Sorry.
What Hiller's referring to really briefly is, as Jesus is explaining what's happening, there's a whole panel which is not comic book anymore, it's just prose.
Yeah.
And that's what she's reading from.
Oh, yeah. S. Plath. Cleopatra. Why are they not telling the first name? So basically, Kurt Cobain, Sylvia Plath, Elliott Smith, Van Gogh, Alexander McQueen, Virginia Woolf, Hunter S. Thompson, just a bunch of people who killed themselves.
Yeah, and then he hands Judas a sewing needle. If you want to die so bad, I'm not going to stop you. Judas takes an extended look at his putative savior.
Did I put putative on my word of the week list? Probably.
And he does the only thing that makes sense. He pricks his thumb with the needle, and a rivulet of blood curls its way out. Mortal, he says, dumbfounded. So Judas is also now mortal if he wants to be. Or, I guess is.
You're right.
And can die if he wants to.
Cool.
And this is supposed to be part of the great paradox of the project. Life is terrible and sad. So what does it take for a person to be happy? What makes life worth living? All those questions. The sort of existential questions you might get in a philosophy class. Which is fair. I agree. Life is meaningless, pointless, and sad.
Yeah.
Continue living, man. Yeah, continue living. Do your thing.
I consider living just to be out of curiosity.
Yeah, that's fair. And the last thing Messiah says flitters about Judas's face and then shoots their way to his hips. All of my research, I'm looking for the means by which we can communicate complicated emotional realities with each other. Words are one way, but there are others too. We have to find the why. We have to support the project. And this is what motivates Judas to continue, I suppose.
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest. When I read it the first time, I mostly skipped that page.
Yeah, I realized that there are chunks of pages that I skimmed over.
But yeah, that was basically Judas experiencing the flesh-made word. And so now he gives him a choice, is what do you choose to attend to? How do you construct meaning? What's worth living for, fighting for, dying for? And that's when Jesus asks him, what happens next?
Yeah. Is that supposed to be Amanda Bynes and she's the man? Because that's what it looks like.
I have no idea. That's funny. But like I said, Jesus does not wait for Judas to answer the question before he simply disappears. The neighbor notices Runeberg and realizes now that it's Jesus. And they walk away into the distance. They leave together, I should say, before Judas manages to answer the question. And Matthew calls him very handsome as ever, as they leave. And a few days later, this is finally the end. Judas is walking down the street, and he's narrating about how things are very different now, but it's hard to describe exactly how. And he pokes himself with a needle, revealing that he can bleed now. In case you were like me and mostly skipped that big page of really, really, really pretentious prose.
Dense.
His narration and the book ends with a message about the grace thing Jesus was talking about. Everything can change if you want it to. It's just a matter of how you're looking at it. The world is cruel, but it's also kind. There is no redemption, and thus we are redeemed all the time, every single day. And so knowing this, there's only one thing that we can do. Rejoice.
Cool.
That's literally the final captions
of moral of the
book.
Story.
Is life sucks.
Rejoice.
Which is fair, I guess.
Sure.
So, let's talk about some final thoughts.
What a slog. I enjoyed the grilled cheese I was eating significantly more than this book.
Yes, Hillary, she told me earlier that she got this impression, but I hated this.
I hated it.
I love comic books.
Yeah.
Comic books are my favorite type of media, period.
Right.
I have
which is why I was
7 in my bedroom that I bought just yesterday.
Yeah, this was good for both. Both of us came to the same conclusion, despite, I questioned whether or not my feelings on it were just because I had no real basis for comparison. Mm-hmm. But no, my feelings are the same as your feelings. Mm-hmm. I do have a lot of experience in this
I
genre.
know comic books. I like comic books. Right. I know really good ones. I've shown you some that you enjoyed and just can't read because it's not your format.
Right.
So
you absolutely. You're right.
Can confirm comic books are not this.
Across the board, terrible.
But this is not good.
No.
I don't understand it. I don't know. I don't. It's not fun. It's not funny. It's openly offensive to everyone.
Right. Yeah. It hides behind like you said earlier, edginess.
Yeah.
But that's not edginess. That's just offensive.
Right.
Yeah. And stupid.
And some of the ideas are not so bad.
Right.
There's the idea that we've talked about again with the Judas thing.
Right, but it's not a new idea. He's not presenting it in a new, interesting way. It's just... And
then there's the end where, life is meaningless. What do you do? That's, like I said, existentialism that you'd get in any philosophy class.
Yeah.
Not to say it's uninteresting, it's just not
I'd say philosophy 101.
Let's go 102
Basic
maybe.
level.
But yeah, and then it's padded with all this other just nonsense.
Yeah.
And it makes it...
I like the Halloween face monster.
Yeah, which one was that?
It's towards the end. He had 3 heads, and all the or 3 or 4 heads, and all the heads looked like Halloween monsters.
Let me find this thing. Were you gonna call that your best out of the best and worst?
No, I don't think so. I liked him, though. I have 3 bests.
Oh.
Considering how much I hate this thing.
Yeah.
Mouse Messiah.
Moses Mouse was great.
Oh yeah, I guess he was basically the mouse prophets were the fucking cutest thing I've ever seen, and I want it. If any of you out there are taxidermists or can hook me up with someone that is reliable and can have ethically sourced mouse, please send me a Moses Mouse.
Apparently, one of the people I work with is a taxidermist.
Oh really?
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
So I might actually have a hookup.
Oh my god, that would be amazing. I fell in love with this taxidermy place in Paris that had some of the most amazing work I've seen. But
I don't personally understand taxidermy.
Oh, I don't know why I like it so much.
Yeah.
I don't want to own all of it. If I was going to own any, it's just mice and ravens. That's all I want. All over my house.
Okay. What was your other best?
That basically this was a word of the week,
Mm-hmm.
and it felt like I was studying for the SATs again. But a lot of these words are words that I had learned at some point, but are not often used, so I got to relearn them.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a list. Aberrations, torpid, solipsistic, amaranthine, curatorial vocation, subsumes, enumerated, fictive, postulates, consubstantiality, vicissitudes, adumbrated, ideograms and serifs, arabesque, ineluctable. He is pretentious as fuck.
Okay. And what's your third? Your third best.
Halloween face monster.
Yeah, I can't find it. Here,
I find it. You tell me about yours.
My best is going to be... I liked the end. Well, not like the end. I like some of the monsters at the end.
Yeah.
The Bodhisattva, the fire breathers, the deer warrior.
Dear Geisha.
Geisha kimono wearer thing. Wynne Matthews not just being an offensive stereotype of a trans
Right.
person. He's kind of funny.
Yeah.
Like,
true.
when he was fighting the deer, he stopped with all that bullshit, and he was just like he got smashed by a hammer. He's like, "Oh, you got, bitch." But that's the best I could go for. Is some of the more creative stuff with the monsters and such.
Gotcha.
And of course, anybody who will agree with me that Judas is one of the most important figures in, history is.
Yeah.
I'll take that because you're right. Judas is the hero of the entire Bible.
It's true.
It's facts.
I cannot be argued. Come at us.
What is the worst for you?
The pretension.
Yeah. It's somehow your best and worst?
Yeah, the words themselves, I love words.
Mm-hmm.
I rarely use words, and yeah. But just not even just the vocabulary.
Yeah.
Just his whole, everything's a little unnecessarily cryptic or obtuse.
People talking riddles through the whole thing.
Exactly. And it seems like an attempt to sound more intelligent, but it just doesn't really come across as actually smart.
Yeah. I'm
finding this goddamn monster.
Go for it.
I don't understand.
It might be the one from the flashback. So check chapter 3. 2, 3.
There it is. That's the Halloween monster. There's like a ghost and a demon and like maybe an ogre.
Okay, I see.
Yeah. Halloween face monster.
See, I thought that might be it, but the other panel it didn't look quite like that, so I wasn't sure.
I like him.
Cool. My worst is going to have to be... I just don't know the audience for this.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Who's this for?
Actually,
I'm not saying you can't ever have like a self-indulgent...
Throw a new worst out there. Nonchalant pedophilia is a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know we're supposed to hate James.
Yeah.
But no one ever...
He doesn't get punished for it, and nobody even really chastises him for it. They joke about it and make fun of him for having a penchant for late little girls, but that's the worst of it.
Yeah.
And so maybe we are supposed to hate him, and this is partially why, but it doesn't seem to do anything.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Or affect him negatively.
Yeah.
Not cool. I don't want to see two little girls
even starting to get...
terrified and crying and about to be fucking raped. Whatever.
Yeah. But for me, I'm not saying you can't have a self-indulgent work that you really just did for yourself.
Yeah.
But I don't know the audience for this. It's not religious people, because it throws all their beliefs in the trash.
Right.
It's not for people who are not religious, because hopefully they'd be better people.
Right.
Than this book is clearly targeted for.
Right.
So who's the audience?
I have no idea. That's a very good point.
I guess I am somewhat glad that I don't fall into this audience. Because if I was like, no, Matthew's a great character. He's just a transvestite. Duh.
Do you know anybody who likes this or has read it?
This actually, the story behind me getting this book is funny. There is another series called Judas, but it's just called Judas.
Yeah.
And
you got this by accident.
I told my comic book store guy, hey, they're going to have a collected thing of Judas coming out soon. I would like it when it comes out.
Yeah.
He's like, okay, I'll get that for you. And he was pretty fast. I was like, okay, great. The next week I come in to my local comic store, because I go every week.
Yeah.
And he says, I got that book for you. And he hands me this. And I'm like, oh, this is not what I was talking about.
Right.
And, he's running a local shop, and he had to pay to bring it in, and then I was supposed to pay for it, so he makes a profit out of it. So he gives me just a wistful look. He's like, do you still want it? And so I'm looking at it, and I'm like, it seems religious in nature, so sure, we can use it for the show.
Right.
And that's how I wound up with this.
Oh, that's amazing.
And the actual book I was looking for just came out a few weeks ago. That is on the, like I said, it's on the long list. But
yeah, in my trying to do a little bit of research on this, I could only find that one.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, that has a different cover. Is it the same thing? No,
Nope.
It's called something
Completely
different too. So are we going to do that at some point in the future? Did you already get it?
Yeah.
Oh, right on. Have you read it?
I haven't read it yet.
Okay.
But yeah, so that's how I wound up with this. So now let's quickly talk about some things that are like this, that are hopefully much better.
Yes.
Mine is going to be a slightly blind recommendation because I haven't actually read it for myself.
Okay, what's that?
It's called Battle Pope.
Battle Pope?
Mm-hmm.
Is it a comic or a book?
It's a comic.
Okay.
It is equally irreverent about religious beliefs, but it's about the Pope who gets superpowered by Jesus to fight the minions of Satan.
Is he like a 90-something-year-old man?
He's pretty old. He's got very white hair, but he's like super buff.
Yeah.
He smokes a cigar.
Okay.
And I'm pretty sure he drinks, he smokes, he fucks. He does fun stuff.
He's a fun pope.
But he also fights on the side of...
Like Jude Law's young pope?
His sidekick is Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently it's like I said, it's very irreverent, but it's not so openly offensive.
Right.
And it's more fun. It's just
I love irreverence.
It's supposed to be about the Battle Pope fighting the forces of evil with his sidekick Jesus.
It's a great title.
Yeah. It's
Battle
by
Pope.
Robert Kirkman. Anybody who knows comic books might know that name.
I would like to do that one too someday.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Duh.
My recommendation would be one of my favorite books of all time, which is Lamb, or The Gospel According to Christ's Childhood Friend, Biff.
Yes, you got me this book.
I bought you this book, yeah. It's one of those books that I love so much, and then I give it to people because I think everybody should have it. Don't really care if you read it or not, it's just you need to have it. It's by Christopher Moore. If you haven't read anything by him, he has a very unique sense of humor, and I have a tendency to just like anything by him, but Lamb is by far his best. And it is also irreverent, but also somehow feels really reverential. It's irreverent and reverent at the same time.
Right, because it's possible to do.
Right. So it kind of just asks the question, what would life have been like if you were just Christ's best friend? Just like a normal dude who grows up with this kid who ends up being the Messiah, and you're kind of this underachieving nobody.
You're Biff.
Right, you're Biff. Just the next kid next door. And it's hilarious, and it's very well done, and it's worth a read.
Excellent.
Read that, not this.
Now, let's talk about what we're doing next week.
Okay.
Let's do the ending.
I guess we should.
Remember, if you like the show, please give us some of those 5-star reviews in whatever podcast app or service you are using to listen to this episode.
Yeah.
And tell your friends about us any way that you can, because we need you to do that.
Tell everyone.
Proselytize.
People on the streets.
Hey, did you hear about this great show?
Have you heard the good news?
Links to everything are in the description of this episode. Social media, the website, all that.
My Instagram.
Her Instagram. You can also go to that website linked in the description and send us a comment or a question so that we can do a mailbag segment where we will just have you yell at us or give us great praise, and we'll respond.
Yeah.
And as always, thank you so much for listening.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
We like you a lot.
We're tired.
Uh-huh.
Bye.
Bye.